Right, let's get started. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. I'm Ryan Herbst. I'm Chief Strategist here at Unified Communications, and I'd like to welcome you to a special online event focused on the role of AI in hybrid meeting rooms. I think this is a timely topic. It is top of mind for all of us. It's a part of almost every customer conversation that we're having these days. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues here at unifiedcommunications.com. Joe Dalecki, who's a principal program manager and architect, and Joseph Living, who leads our design and engineering team. And we have a very special guest for this discussion, Brian Phillips, director of the product marketing for group solutions at Poly. Brian, thanks so much for being here. And yeah, I wanted to give you a moment to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your role at Poly.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So yeah, I've been at Poly for a while. It's been about 16 years now. I think at some point or another, I've worked on just about every product in our portfolio, I guess with the exception of headsets. I come from the legacy Polycom side. But my focus over the last several years has been on our video conferencing solutions. So my team and I now head up basically product marketing for anything video from Poly, whether conference rooms to some of our new personal video solutions. That is what we are focused on these days.
Wonderful. Yeah, so before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that the chat should be enabled, and so if you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat during the last 10 or so minutes of the event. We will take questions if you have them. And again, we've got a great resource with Brian here today. And yeah, also post event, we'll be sending out both a link to this recording along with an opportunity to have a discussion with a strategist around some of these same topics if helpful. So yeah, let's dive in. This format, for those of you, if you're new to this format with us, it's casual. We're going to lob some questions out and allow these subject matter experts to parse through them. And so yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy it. And we're going to get started. So first question, Brian, would love to kind of get a sense of how you and how Poly really thinks about AI and its role in creating more engaging natural experiences, both audio and video experiences in hybrid meeting rooms.
Yeah, it is. It is a hot topic these days. It's actually one that we've been focused on for quite a while, even long since prior to COVID. We've got a CTO group and a user experience group that have actually put a lot of research into kind of what this means. And I know AI becomes kind of a buzzword, right? And suddenly, right, what is AI? And anything is AI. But really, when we think of, okay, what is AI in the context of meetings and meeting spaces? To us, it's about having technology that can automatically adjust to what's going on in the meeting without users having to intervene, right? That's kind of at the core of it, what it means, right? That the solutions are smart enough to recognize what's happening and automatically adjust to that, right? And there's other subcomponents under that, right? People talk about machine learning as a part of AI. We've got components of that too, like on our backend servers, right? As we're doing new versions of what we call our noise block AI technology, or new iterations of our smart camera experiences. We're using machine learning on the back end to kind of refine that, make it better and better over time. But really, at its core, it really is solutions that are smart enough to automatically adjust to what's going on so everybody gets a better experience. Because I think especially as we talk now about hybrid meetings and what does that mean, as you got some people in the office and some people remote. And I think expectations on experiences have changed with all this, right?
For sure.
I think there's a lot of environments that previously, right, video conferencing happened from meeting room to meeting room. And so there were certain expectations about what that experience was like. And a lot of people had never used video like in a personal context from their own laptop before. And all of a sudden, as everybody's been doing that over the last year and a half, and there's some natural advantages to that with, right, you're seeing people up close and the microphone is right there. And so if you suddenly go back to some sort of hybrid working environment where you got people in conference rooms, going back to the old school bowling alley, a bunch of little heads in a little square on your screen, that's not going to be acceptable. Maybe in the same way that it was considered okay pre-COVID. So I think that's what's going to cause a lot of demand for some of these smarter solutions going forward.
It's interesting. Expectations for sure have changed. In many cases, we have folks who were really mostly in the office before. They weren't kind of they weren't remote participants. They now have kind of lived that experience, and as they're coming, either sitting remote, continuing to be remote, and kind of watching that view or into the conference room, yeah, their expectations are similar to what they have for the pure remote world, right? I want to see people up close and personal. I love the fact that people get kind of divided into their own boxes. I think what's particularly important at this moment, I think we know from a service perspective, with teams, for example, there's a really interesting kind of pathway. There's a lot that's happening now. There's a lot that's just going to get better in the future. And so I know that we're relying very heavily on the hardware and the AI inside the camera and the audio intelligence to create some of these really compelling experiences, because yeah, just no longer acceptable to just see this zoomed out view of the room when all of the remote participants are up close and personal, and along with certainly other elements of the remote experience that we need to bring into the room, like reactions and chat and transcript and agenda and all kind of fluid components that go along with it. Yeah, but certainly, I guess maybe you just want to talk for a moment around on the camera intelligence side, because I think we also know that yeah, things just have to work. We need AI to replace yeah, a lot of what in the old days of video conferencing was kind of a manual process. We just know that people the expectation is such, and the reality is such that nobody's going to grab a remote control and hit a preset in that world. And so we're really relying much more heavily on the intelligence of the devices to solve for this. So yeah, I would love to just drill down a little bit more around kind of where Poly has been. I know there's a couple of new products that were introduced recently that are a big part of this kind of intelligent camera and AI-based discussion.
Yeah, the camera part of this is going to become really crucial to delivering this. It's like this notion of a quality of experience, right? That no matter where you're taking your meeting from, whether you're in a meeting room or whether you're at the far end, everybody should be an equal participant in that meeting. And if you're not, then, I mean, hybrid working really doesn't work if that's not the case, right? So it's really critical to making this all kind of come together. And we've been from a smart camera standpoint, kind of doing this for a long time. And we were some of the original innovators in having kind of smart camera solutions that could focus on the person speaking. We've been doing that for kind of 10 plus years. And yeah, in a lot of cases, especially pre-COVID, we would talk a lot about that the reality is how many users walk in a meeting room and start futzing around with the camera controls, right? Like, I'll do that because I'm kind of a nerd and I'm savvy enough with video stuff that I'll actually in a conference room start like panning, tilting, and zooming cameras. But like normal people don't do that, right? Like, so without some of these smart cameras, it's like you're always going to get the zoomed out bowling alley view that has sucked forever, right? But I think it takes on a different level of significance now as we get to some of these capabilities that Microsoft is introducing and Teams that Zoom has been innovating on, Smart Gallery, and where it gets beyond just, well, nobody wants to mess with camera controls. It's as you get to some of these more sophisticated experiences with multiple streams of video coming out of the same room, like there's no set of camera controls on a touch panel that would allow someone to manually manipulate that experience. So I think it elevates it beyond just, well, it makes it easier because you don't have to mess with camera controls, to no, it now is going to reach a point. It's not necessarily there yet, but it's going to get there it's going to deliver a whole different type of experience that you like literally couldn't build yourself. It's kind of the promise of AI, but people get, I don't know, a little scared about that term sometimes, right? The machines are taking over, but really, we've got the ability now in the technology to deliver a better experience than somebody off in the corner with a touch panel is going to be able to do around delivering that equality of experience for everyone in a really smart way, in a really dynamic and fast way. So I think it changes the equation around, like I said, expectations, right? As we're all starting to go back into the office and starting to get these kind of hybrid meetings.
You mentioned sort of replacing the idea of having somebody in the room kind of controlling, that's their primary role, is just controlling who sees what. and, taking that and, putting it into the software and into the hardware that is going to help drive that experience. So
we talked about Microsoft and kind of what they're doing. I thought it might be helpful to unpack a little bit kind of the vision. So certainly a lot of folks have seen kind of what's behind me. A lot Microsoft has recently, both in blog posts and in announcements, shared their future vision for hybrid spaces, and specifically around Teams rooms, some enhancements that are coming, and kind of two components to that, and hardware and Poly's hardware is a big kind of critical component. So I think in this first wave that what's starting to happen now is hardware is going to become super important to that, for our ability to create a engaging experience in the room, and so that the camera itself is going to have the intelligence to make some decisions, to potentially create some layouts, and the front row layout that you see, kind of an example of behind me, is a new view that's coming into the room. So for those sitting in the room, they're able to consume content, more of the elements of the Teams meeting that the remote folks are participating in, and also kind of change where our gallery sits, so it's more eye level. And so that's really exciting. That's coming. And then over time, this segmentation approach, where the intelligence of the hardware is going to be able to send multiple streams of video up to the service. The service can be able to take those streams and put people into their own boxes. And so I think this one is important. A lot of customers are trying to unpack this, but I maybe could talk a little bit about kind of where Poly's role in this, on the journey with Microsoft, and I think the products that specifically support it, and really what can customers be doing at this moment to try to make the right decisions, to pick the right horses, to kind of realize this vision as it unfolds both this year and into next year with Microsoft.
Yeah, and that last question, it's a tricky one right now, honestly, because some of this is still so new and it's so nascent that the requirements from platform providers like Microsoft are still kind of evolving. I do think a couple of things on that. One, it is going to be crucial that there's an experience from the platform that it's delivering, there's an experience from the camera that's delivering, and those have to work hand in hand, right? I mean, otherwise you can end up with some really kind of goofy stuff, right? So the device in the room working in concert with the service is going to be crucial to this all coming together. And I think the other element to this that a lot of folks are going to find is that the device in the room is going to have a huge impact on the overall experience. So what I mean by that is, even as Microsoft defines, okay, we've got these new front row experiences, we've got these new segmented experiences that are going to be rolling out, and they're going to have kind of a prescriptive vision for the experience that they want to deliver over Teams. You're going to find that the actual way that experience is implemented and the true experience somebody gets during a call is going to be heavily influenced by the devices in the room. We've already seen this just as an example with Zoom Smart Gallery, and I know there's a lot of Teams folks on this call, but just as an example, because that one is real and in market now. So we support Zoom Smart Gallery on our kind of latest generation devices. There are others in the market with their devices who also support it, but the experiences, even though Zoom has said, oh, here's a smart gallery experience. You get this view and this view and this view, and this is how it works. The actual reality of how that comes together in a room is very different on a Poly device versus some of our competitors' devices. And we believe the experience our device delivers actually most closely matches Zoom's vision for when they launch Smart Gallery. And some of the other devices out there, frankly, we don't think actually match that vision as well and are doing some very different things. Now, how that's going to manifest itself for Teams remains to be seen. And right, Microsoft certainly, I'm sure, wants to be very prescriptive on what's this experience going to look like. But there absolutely is going to be a heavy influence on the device in the room for the quality of experience, the performance, and how it's actually going to work at the end of the day. So then the other element of that, to your second question, is how do you how do you make sure that you're investing in technology that is going to be able to go along for this ride, right? And that is, like I said, it's tricky because requirements are still coming together. We're still getting requirements from Microsoft, and will be for years, right? This is not going to be something that just rolls out and it's like, here it is.
Yeah.
All right, this is what the meeting experience is going to be like. This is going to be an evolving thing over the course of the coming years, right? So it's hard to say, oh, yes, you are, this product will definitely support every Microsoft feature for the next 3 years in Teams, right? That's impossible to say. But I do think, I mean, certainly, right? If you're buying latest generation technology, you can be more assured that those are devices that, right, are going to, they're going to have, because some of these experiences, they require a lot of the device in the room, right? When you're starting to send multiple segmented views and things like that, it requires a lot of the device in terms of processing and other components. And so certainly buying something that's newer is generally going to be better. I think another factor too that can be an important consideration is, especially when just looking at the camera design, is it a camera design that is made for these kind of experiences that Microsoft, Zoom, and others are trying to deliver? What I mean by that is, so we have something like our latest video solutions that we actually just announced over the last couple of weeks. We have a new camera called the Studio E70 and a new video bar that is called the X70. They both have the same, basically multi-camera module, right? We have 2 cameras in there with 2 lenses and sensors, one to be able to see the whole room, one to be able to zoom in a little bit further, and then they work together in concert. But the point is, that kind of camera solution is designed from the ground up to deliver these kind of experiences that Microsoft and others are talking about. In contrast, some of the legacy technology is going to have a harder time. So for example, I mean, we've got a product at Poly that's called Eagle Eye Producer. It works with one of our, what we call Eagle Eye 4 optical zoom cameras, and it adds another little camera accessory that you don't actually ever see that camera view. You literally can't. It's just there for the internals and the guts to be able to always see the room and tell the optical zoom camera what's going on and where to zoom in. And so that's all fine and good, and that's been around for a while. But that kind of solution is never going to be able to be supported in some of these new views. And the challenge is because optical zoom cameras have an inherent disadvantage, because the nature of optical zoom means it can only see this much, right? When it's zoomed in, it can't send you those multiple segmented views. Even if you have this other little camera along with it that's always seeing the room, that camera's not transmitting. So it can't send multiple streams to Teams, right? Because the real camera is just seeing a certain small part of the room. So those are some things to look out for, right? As far as things around camera design, is this a camera design that is built around some of these kind of experiences, or is it more of a legacy design that's going to be great from an optical zooming standpoint to the end of the room, but is going to, frankly, never meet the requirements that Microsoft and others are going to have of these kind of multi-stream experiences? I think that can be a key criteria maybe you should look out for.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we see before COVID even, when you talked about that bowling alley style room, right, and how there was more of a classification of the types of people that would be in that room versus remote, and maybe specific roles were kind of always remote or most of the time remote. And I think we'll see a much more diverse spread of roles across the board, from bottom tier all the way to C-level, that are now in this hybrid mode that we talked about. And so that's where I think the focus is so high on this quality of the experience and the equitability, because now it's not just a certain role that's remote versus in the room. And so we're thinking about the rooms in a whole new way as well, the spaces, the physical spaces, and how do we make sure that the people in the room have a great view of the content, which they haven't always had, and how do the remote participants have a great view of the people in the room, which they haven't always had. And so we're thinking of spaces in this new way too. And I think Poly's certainly thinking about their designs of those cameras, providing the multiple cameras, being able to see the whole room at scale, but then provide much more of that focused attention will certainly help with that. But I think we have to we're taking a giant step back in its high level thinking of what do we actually need to do from a physical design standpoint to be able to leverage a lot of this great new technology that's going to rely on this AI. So yeah.
let's let's shift gears a little bit and talk about larger spaces. I think this is at this moment one of the more challenging areas for customers. Yeah, I think there is there is AI-based intelligent experiences that are available, from Poly, and in the marketplace. I would say there is a particular size of room, and often this is boardroom, and where a lot of the mandates are coming from customers through their leadership teams down to create experiences similar to what we have on a meeting like this, when we're all up close and personal in larger spaces. This does speak. We just had a question chatted in, why not ask attendees in the meeting room to connect with their mobile device, and the camera on off. And yeah, I think so a couple of things here. One, there's absolutely a role, and maybe a very important role, for companion devices in the room over both today and evolving over time. I know that there is intelligence today, for example, in the team service to try to be aware that the device that I have in that room is a companion, that there's already a meeting taking place in that room, and to bring me in with my audio off, or at least suggest, unless I overrode that. And I know that Microsoft is also really thinking a lot about ways that they can make that experience even better. Just if there's when I join from my mobile device, and things were announced recently, that the companion, it's a very intentional companion experience, because the audio and video, the primary room system, is already handling that. And so having access to reactions and being able to quickly share content, or being able to use this as my personal viewing space. But I think the camera side of that, where we have a large group of people and we want to put everybody in their own box, this is absolutely and available today, is only going to get better, and probably very important to the long-term kind of discussion, because there's only so far, I guess, from a practical perspective, that a single camera in the front of a large room, there's only so far we can go. But I just wanted to get a sense from Poly's perspective about large room, kind of how you think about it today. I know that products, that I know there's between E70, X70, these products handle a fairly large room, but when we get into large training and boardroom, what's your take on kind of how that begins to evolve, and how do we create some of these more compelling experiences in those more complex, larger specialty spaces?
It is a tough challenge. The bigger the room, it starts to get exponentially more complex, especially then you start to layer on some of these kind of experiences where you get with front row and other things, and the complexity gets really tough of how do you solve that challenge of the really big space. And I think, like you said, there's a certain amount you can do with that kind of front of the room camera experience, and that's where, even in our design of the E70 and X70, right, having one camera that's dedicated just to being able to see further back in the room is optimized for that, working in conjunction with one that's the wider field of view to see the whole room, is one way we're trying to at least get to some of those, I think of them, I guess, like mid-large spaces, right? And we're going to continue doing more there. You're going to see more coming out along those lines. But even that, it's going to have its limitations, right? But as we talked about, 12x optical, bump it up to 15, 20x optical, that's not going to solve your problem, right? It's because that's going to have its own natural limitations and be unable to deliver some of these other experiences that you want to have. So it's, how do you solve that? I do think companion devices are going to have an interesting role in that. I think you're going to see a lot of interesting innovation on that side. I think something else too that we're going to start to see more of is, because we know we can't solve the whole problem from the front of the room, how do we disperse the technology to different places in the room? So if you can envision the big training room, that it's not just the one camera at the front, maybe it's 6 cameras in the room, and they're all placed strategically at different locations and are all able to intelligently talk to each other and figure out which one has the best view to show the person who's currently asking that question, or to show the last 5 people, or that interactive conversation, and all of them sending multiple streams then back at the same time. So, right, we got some work to do to get there, but I think that concept can solve a lot of the challenges in these rooms. And the great thing too is, right, again, even if you could get the magical solve-it-all camera that would be at the front of the room, frankly, I think taking, I don't know, less expensive camera options, multiples, and situating those strategically around the room actually can cost substantially less than one Uber solution that sits at the front that still may not solve all your problems. So that's where I think more of a dispersed technology approach is, I think, going to be the key over the mid to long term to help to solve a lot of these larger room challenges. We definitely aren't there today, right? But it's going to get there pretty quickly.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it's I think the placement of those cameras, because when we have a single front of room camera, the impact that has on orientation, angle, so that's often requiring a lot of changes to try to deliver a compelling experience. Some of those are simple. Sometimes, and a lot of that is what we're recommending these days. It makes a lot of sense. Just shift the orientation of the table, and we're reducing capacity. In some instances, that's okay because not everybody's not in the room at the same time anymore. But over time, in this multi-camera approach, if front of room and side of room and back of room and center of table, like if we've got an ability for all of that to work together and to be integrated both at a hardware and service level, then all of a sudden some of these more complex environments get really interesting. And I think you add companion onto that. And that really is our answer. But I think that this begins likely to play out more in the next year kind of world than it does now. And so I think it's really important, I think, for those that are planning return to work, involved in projects right now, that this is an important conversation to be having around our larger spaces. What is our plan? How do we set the right expectations? There are things we can do today, and we know it's just going to get better. But I think there's this one, I would say, super important because it's often some of the leadership-driven initiatives that and requests, and at this moment, the personal devices can be particularly helpful, maybe even larger role, although we think they'll continue to have a large role over time.
Yeah, that's something that we're thinking about daily, right? Is kind of how to approach the large boardroom, the large training room, because you want that automated experience. I don't want my users to have to figure out what button do I push to get this certain camera view. So being able to build that in from an automated perspective with AI, but right now we're having to do that through custom programming, and you don't really want to go down that route, but that's kind of where you land at with multi-camera currently. But knowing that this, that is the vision, right? We're all painfully aware that this is where we want to get to. So finding ways to incorporate that into the software, I think, is going to be the next evolution of it. But just want to be clear that to everybody on the call, that is something that we are thinking through, and we do have ways of tackling that even today. Just know that it's not quite as simple a plug and play experience, but it is something that we are building toward. We also think through ways to enable this through coordinated join with multiple meeting rooms, and ways to kind of leverage the software to get us these extra vantage points that we need within the spaces. Mobile devices definitely help, but it's just also thinking through, having the audio off on thhow many people are joined by video, because you eventually just get cycled out and you never come back into the frame again, because that device isn't capturing any audio to know that person is talking. So it's just always thinking through what how does this actually play out in real time is kind of where we are right now.
So we had we were going to do Q&A at the end. We'll still, and please, I just want to remind everybody on that's attending, if you've got questions for Brian or for the group, feel free to chat them in. We've got some time reserved in just a little while where we'll take them. But I think one of them that came in, it relates to E70, and the question is, does E70 have intelligent capabilities, even though it's not Teams certified? So Brian will take, I know E70 is in queue for certification. You could kind of speak, maybe just give us a little bit of kind of what is E70 and X70, a little. I know you gave us kind of the high level, but maybe you could speak specifically to where we are, and or the extent to you can share where we are in the certification process.
Yeah, absolutely. So just in essence, E70 and X70 both have this kind of next generation camera design that's it's got essentially two different cameras built in that work together in concert. So it's two lenses, two 4K sensors. One of them is designed with a narrower 70-degree field of view camera so that it can reach the back corners of the room and still be able to show the participants clearly. It's actually even, we say it's a 4K sensor just because that's the term people resonate with the most. It's actually pretty substantially more than that, so that we can be able to zoom in to those back corners of the room and still stay in full HD quality, right? Because the sensor is robust enough to be able to do that without getting into the blocky digital zoom. But then it's also got a wider view 120-degree field of view camera so that you can see everything in the room. And then the trick is it's a whole camera system that works together intelligently to be able to automatically and show the part of the room that's most relevant to that meeting, whether it's showing the whole group or zooming in on somebody who's specifically talking. And then we're going to be layering things on over time around even within the camera itself, having multiple segments it can send as a single stream and things like that. And so to that question of, is there intelligence built in today? Absolutely. It's got a ton of intelligence built in today, even for that more traditional, just sending a single stream back to Teams kind of experience, right? Because it's got that intelligence built into the camera itself to be able to do the automatic speaker tracking, to be able to, as I said, we're going to work towards these kind of split screen, multi-segment views, even going back as the single stream. And then the nice thing too is, because that intelligence is built into the camera, even if you do have to jump on like a non-Teams meeting, like you just got invited to a WebEx call and you got to get the system in a WebEx call, well, the camera experience is going to be the same regardless. It's not going to change, right? But then what you start to layer on here is some of the intelligence built into Teams and the Teams specific experiences. And honestly, it's going to get tricky over the coming quarters and years, right? Of when you're seeing a Teams front row experience with an E70 camera as part of an MTR for Windows, like, okay, well, what components of that are parts of Teams and what by the experience is delivered by Poly? And honestly, it's going to be tricky and hard, I think, for a lot of our customers and users to kind of parse out, right? And that's where the key is the device and the platform like Teams really working hand in hand to deliver a great experience. So on the certification side, so yeah, we're actively working towards that and are very close on that E70 camera as part of the MTR on Windows solutions. That's going to be coming, should be next quarter. So in this next couple of months here. And then we're also working on the E70 camera because we've got MTR on Android solutions as well, right? So we've got the Studio X70 has got Android built in. So that's going to be coming probably a few months later. It's a more robust certification process for the full video bars. And Microsoft certification is, I mean, it's pretty stringent, right?
Not cursory, right? Yeah.
It is not an easy process. So that's going to take a little bit longer. And then also we have a device called the G7500. It's like more of a modular system where you have the device with MTR and Android built in, and you can add in different cameras or different microphones. So E70 with that G7500, that as a whole team certified solution is also underway. It'll be coming over the next few months.
And how much control does Poly see having over the camera itself going forward after it's released, after it's certified? You know, being able to add new features, maybe take advantage of some of those narrower field of views or dual camera support to be able to push and pull different video into the room. So yeah, I mean, how does that play out looking ahead?
It's going to be a really significant part of the experience. Because even as, say, Teams is requesting some very specific views and very specific streams, and Teams is saying, Poly system, I want you to send me this and this and this specific view, the way that those views are sent, the speed at which we can change to those views and change between different views, even in some of those views that may be getting split up among multiple things, the device in the room is going to have a really, really significant influence over that ultimate experience that people are going to get. And I do think, kind of like I said earlier like we've seen already on Zoom Smart Gallery, the Poly experience on Zoom Smart Gallery is substantially different, and I would argue better than the Zoom Smart Gallery experience on competitor X's device. They're very different experiences. Remains to be seen on Teams, and Microsoft you even see it in some of their certification processes and things like that. They're very stringent on the experience they want to deliver to every Teams experience, right? But there's just no getting around the reality that the speed and accuracy of your speaker framing, and the ability to track in real time somebody who is presenting in a room and follow them in real time, and the ability to transition seamlessly between cameras and not have these kind of awkward
jerky moments, yeah.
Things like that. That's all going to be stuff that's within the device. And you're, I think, going to see, as much as I think Microsoft, their desire is going to be, so just transparently, I think their desire is going to be, no matter what device is in the room, the team's experience is going to look the same. That just is not going to be the reality. The device in the room is going to have a massive influence over the ultimate experience that you're going to get on the far end. I think there's just no getting around it.
So just a couple minutes before we have a little time for questions, but and again, anybody on the call that would like to ask a question, please chat it in. I'm going to just spend a moment, because I think a very important part of this experience, and certainly a place that AI has a role as well, is outside of the room and on the remote side of the hybrid experience. Or this could be actually sitting, I think these days, very, very common that we're going to have hoteling or touchdown spaces. And maybe you could, if you could chat, Brian, for a moment about kind of Poly's thought process, and even if there's some specific products that really born based on this moment, and things and we also know, I think, that in terms of audio and video experiences, it just takes 1 week length to break the entire experience, including that hybrid boardroom or hybrid shared space, physical space. Yeah, I mean, let's talk a little bit about both personal workstation, hoteling, and work at home.
The personal space, I mean, yes, the personal spaces are going to be key to all this, and AI, I think, has a really significant role to play there as well. I think in personal spaces, it's a lot simpler on the camera side. Like we talked about, the bigger the room, the bigger the challenges to deliver a really great video experience and camera experience. It's a lot simpler, I think, in a personal context, though there's still an application there. I mean, I'm using a device right now called the Poly Studio P15. It's basically I've got one here somewhere. You can't see it. It looks like this, right? It just goes on top of my monitor. It's got a camera designed more for a kind of personal field of view, and audio that's designed for, my home office, or it's great in like a touchdown room, a focus room, kind of back in the office for 1 to 2 people. Now, the nice thing about that is, so I have like this standing desk gizmo here. I'm sitting right now because I'm feeling lazy. I should have stood up, right? Because I like to speak with some energy, but I'm sitting. But when I do stand up, when I'm not being lazy, the nice thing is I raise up the standing desk gizmo, and it automatically reframes me right in the middle. You've probably even seen it doing it a little bit here in the call. I don't pay much attention to it, but it's probably like moved around and shifted a little bit to try to reframe me. The nice thing is, if I stand up this standing desk, I don't have to again adjust the thing physically or try to play with camera controls. It just does it. So there's definitely an application there, but I think that's where the audio side of AI becomes most critical. And we've got that for meeting rooms as well, right? We've got things like our noise block AI technology to try to filter out distracting sounds, or we have something called acoustic fence that tries to just capture voices within a specific area and block outside conversations. And so those are hugely relevant for meeting rooms. And in some ways, I think even more so in a personal context where you can get less controls, right? At least in the boardroom, you can do some things, right? You can adjust the HVAC system to try to minimize noise, and you can put acoustic paneling on walls and things like that. And that ain't happening in somebody's home office, right?
Sometimes you don't even have 4 walls. I mean, sometimes
Exactly.
you don't have 4 walls. And so the acoustic fence can be your imaginary walls that help you keep the sound in the space. So
Exactly, right. And right to your point, like you put all this time and effort into this amazing boardroom experience that everybody can be seen clearly, and you've got this big call, and all of a sudden, like, the one person on the far end has like the leaf blower going right outside the window or something, right? And it's like the call is your AO until like, so having these kind of audio AI technologies in a personal context, whether it's at home or even back in the office, right? Because a lot of these kind of touchdown spaces, focus rooms, you can have a bunch of them kind of stacked up side by side. You get people walking around right outside of the hallway. Maybe it's a big glass window and somebody's standing right there having a conversation, like 2 feet away from you, just outside a pane of glass while you're on a call. So having these kind of acoustic fence, noise block technologies in those kind of spaces too, I think is going to be an important part of not having the meeting distractions. So that's just where I think the script flips a little bit. In both contexts, I think both video AI and audio AI are important, but I think the video part, especially in the larger rooms, the audio part, especially in some of those personal contexts and use cases.
Sure.
No, it's interesting, and I know that from a service side, some of that is happening as well. But I think this is an area that the more the merrier. Yeah, if we can get it at the service, it's just so critically important from an experience perspective. I know something else that just on the kind of hoteling space, that side, I know Polly introduced some integrated display, that world. Maybe just talk through that product. I think it's just kind of interesting from a hybrid perspective. It has a role certainly at home and has a role in a variety of space. Just want to think about not an area that folks have historically thought about, Polly, on the kind of display side. Well, have you just take an opportunity to talk a little bit about where Polly kind of sees that fitting and kind of why it came to market?
Yeah, so just a few months ago, we launched a device called the Poly Studio P21. So it's essentially a display that's got the camera, microphone, speakers, everything built in that you need for a video call. But
Lighting,
it's a USB device, right? So it doesn't have a codec built in. It doesn't have integrated Teams or anything like that. You plug it into your laptop, and then you just fire up your Teams call on your laptop, and you're using the P21 as a really high quality display. It's just the kind of richness of the display, the brightness, it's really optimized for great quality video. And then of course you're using this poly quality camera, microphone, speakers, and everything to deliver this great experience on a call that you're making from your laptop. So the great thing about that, I think especially that, think of it as a shared personal space, right? The hoteling space, that drop-in room, the focus room, touchdown room, is you can have this device in that space. User brings in their laptop to jump on a quick call. It's a single USB-C cable. You just plug it into the laptop. It automatically drives it as a display off the laptop, plus camera, mic, speakers, and everything else. You just plug it in, you fire up your Teams call, and it just goes, right? So very, I think, simple to deploy, very simple for people to use, because you're not having to plug in, all right, I got the USB for the camera, and then I need HDMI for the monitor, and then maybe if it's just a webcam in there, did you bring your headset? Oh crap, I didn't bring my headset. I'm just gonna have to use the lousy audio in my laptop, right? You can kind of get around a lot of that. So it simplifies that kind of touchdown room use case when you got the one device that does everything. Just plug it in, and it just kind of works, right? You're not having to futz with multiple cables and figure out configuration settings on your Teams app and things like that. So I think that's huge for a lot of those kind of return to the office efforts to deploy these kind of private, jump in meeting spaces when you need to get on a private call, and being in the open workspace is just not going to work for that meeting that you're going to be on. I think it's a really good solution for something like that.
Yeah, anybody that's been on a call with me knows how important the lighting is to me. And so just having that part of it built in too, I mean, it takes a lot of the work out for me, and it certainly helps, I think, everybody present their best on video. So yeah.
And Joe is joining us from Hawaii today, so he doesn't have his normal setup. We're accustomed to seeing Joe's production studio setup. Yeah,
this is as remote as you can get, I think.
Well, we are at time, and I just wanted to say big thank you, Brian, for joining us. This has been really insightful. I think great conversation. And for anyone who's watching this either live or on demand, just please know the team here at unifiedcommunications.com would love to continue this conversation. There is a lot, I would say, at this moment in time. As much as the world is getting simpler and there's some really evolved hardware you can just pull out of a box, there is a lot from a discussion perspective on how to be successful in this hybrid world, and what hybrid means to you, and how far you want to lean in, and how you want to define it. And it is maybe a more involved conversation than we've ever, I guess, in kind of history of these conversations. This moment seems like the most important one. And so just know we're certainly, whether that's kind of leading into and having a deeper discussion around kind of intelligent camera, whether that's talking about Android versus Windows, the role of Surface Hub and this coordinated experience. There's a lot of neat kind of building blocks and opportunity. And so you'll see in our follow-up that goes out a link where if you want to schedule a strategy session with a strategist, somebody like Joe or myself, or Joe or myself, you're welcome to. And yeah, we appreciate you attending. And with that, it is a wrap. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Great. Yep. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.